beat the door in, show him what it feels like, that kind of attitude. It kind of makes that go away, doesn't it? And so that's another thing that helps with the ability to know. There's a little bit of separation from that. And so for the longer ago something was, the better you're able to look back on it and say, this was the right way to do it, or that was the right way to do it. And, the teenagers might not believe it, but we, as adults, most all that stuff we've been through. There's some of it, maybe some of us haven't, but as far as it goes, we've been through it, and we know. And when we tell them, look, you'll look back on this later and you'll realize it wasn't as important as you think it is. They don't believe us right now, but they'll believe us in time. And so that's kind of another thing. And like I said, a man that refuses to see what's right in front of him, it doesn't matter where you put him. If he's not willing to think critically both about himself and about the information in front of him, it doesn't matter what information you put in front of him. It does not matter how you try and do it. And there are people that you look at. It's one of the reasons that people get pulled into things where they just sink more and more and more into something that's not worth it at all. Is where they just can't see. All they can see is what they want to look at versus what really is there. And so this quarter, we'll be going through, Lord willing, 5 books that we'll look at. We're going to look at Proverbs. We're going to look at Ecclesiastes. We're going to look at Psalm. We're going to look at the Song of Solomon, and we're going to look at Job. We're not going to do them in this particular order that he's got on the slides here. As talked about, we're going to spend about, I believe, 5 classes on Job to begin. And that's where we're going to start our lesson this morning in Job. And I believe then he's going to go with Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and then Psalm and then Song of Solomon. And so that's where we'll be looking. But if you look at all of the different subjects here, Proverbs is a book specifically about wisdom. But all of these books are actually about wisdom. Job is about wisdom with life and suffering and the things that happen. Psalm is a book of wisdom about God and praise to God. And it's about Christ. And it's about us and our sin. And about how we should, if you look through there, you see all of these wonderful psalms about how we should see all of these things. Ecclesiastes talks about life and meaning. So many people, they go through life and say, well, what's the meaning of life? That's a big question you get everywhere. And it tells you the folly of putting too much into all of the things here on earth, doesn't it? And all of the material and the worldly and not enough on the spiritual, which is what the real meaning of life is. And so in the Song of Solomon, there's a lot to that book and a lot about the power of love, not just a love for others, but the love of Christ for us. And so there's a lot of good study in this quarter. Like I said, we're going to start with Job this morning. Job, as Wes likes to make it, it's not Job. But if you look at it, this book, I think you can kind of say it is a lot about work. Not physical labor, as it would be, but the time and the effort that Job has spent over the course of his life dedicating it to serving God, right? And that doesn't just happen, does it? That takes work. That is, as you might call it, a job in and of itself. But it's not a bad one. But if Job had not spent his life dedicated to God, as it were, would he have been able to weather the trials that he had in front of him? No. And so we're not going to spend time that Wes has in other classes and other lessons going through every bit of the book. or all of the different facets of it, but, this is going to be, like I said, about 5 classes or so of rough overview of it. And we can kind of split it into a few parts. You've got a prologue, a dialogue, which is them, his friends and their talk back and forth, and then a monologue of Job and others just talking themselves. And then what God has to say. And there are a lot of things said in this whole book, and so many wasted words, I think. I mean, you've got 37, you've got basically 2 chapters in the beginning, and then all that talks about the facts of, and the things that happen. And then you've got 36 chapters really of talking. And like I said, there are a lot of words, and the 4 chapters at the end of it are worth more than all the rest of them. And part of wisdom is seeing that, being able to tell. When God is the one that's speaking, that's what we need to pay attention to, isn't it? That is what's important. And, of course, the epilogue, the last bit of it, tells what happens afterwards. And so getting started, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters, and his substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-donkeys, and a very great household. So this man was the greatest of all the men of the East. It's very informative. There was a man, right? Not a fake man. This is a story or a parable or something else. Job was a real man from a real place who did real things. He was a wealthy man. He had a lot. As I said, the greatest of the men of the East. He was a family man. He had sons and daughters that he loved. He was a holy man. And that's the thing, if you think about it, if you look at the rest of these things describing him, this is the most important. Whether I'm wealthy, whether I have a large family or a lot of people around me or any of that, what I do in regards to how I view God and how I obey God and my faith in God are more important, right? Now, Job being perfect, right, there's a little to it. Strong says complete, usually morally pious, blameless, upright, righteous. The proper notion is that of simplicity, sincerity, and absence from guile or evil intention. Does this say that Job never made a mistake in his life? No.
I think we'll see from the Lord's responses that Job was on the edge of going too far.
Yeah, Job
spoke rashly.
Yeah, Job spoke rashly. But even before this, does this say that Job never made a mistake at all in his life? No, but he was, this is not a man that purposefully goes out and does something that's wrong, right? This is a man that tries to go out of his way to make sure that he does right. It doesn't say he never made a mistake. But blameless in this sense is after someone's made a mistake and they've made reparations for it, do you really blame them anymore for it? Is there anything left on that? If you're looking at it like in a legal way, like in a lot of times, God compares his treatment of his people in Israel, kind of like there's some dialogue back and forth, like it's a court case. According to the courts, once you've made full reparations, are you guilty anymore? You've served your time, right? You're done. You're not blamed in the matter anymore, as that would be. And so this is that same kind of thing. If he's made a mistake, it's not something that, a purposeful or something with malice that he'd gone and done, but if he'd made a mistake, he's made up for it. He's made sure that he has honored God with his sacrifices and his repentance and such. Yes, sir, Brother Donald.
Well, it's like, when you look at Job and you realize, like, certain things come to mind, like, he made a covenant with his eyes not to look at, young women. He sacrificed for his children just in case they had done something. He went, we would say above and beyond, but he was really tuned in to be very purposeful, to make sure that he was in a right relationship with God. He wasn't going to let things, become a stumbling block. It's like he was being proactive in trying to head it off before it became a problem. And it speaks to us today, that's the kind of attitude we should have. If we all have weaknesses, we need to be kind of making sure we're trying to, if I know that there's certain things that are going to be a stumbling block to me, I need to make preparation to stay away from it, do what I need to do to stay in the right relationship with God, instead of going, well, if it happens, it happens, I'm not looking for it, just kind of just without purpose, actually trying to be, like I say, proactive about that.
And that's a really good point on all of this. If you look at this, you think about it, Job's not the kind of person that's going to be involved in a situation where there are issues, and he's not going to sit there and say, well, it ain't my fault or it ain't my problem. How many people do that kind of thing these days? It's like with response to, actually pretty perfect. You talked about when he brought up he made a covenant with his eyes where he was not going to look upon a maid, but something goes along with that as far as the world's idea about modesty and things is a woman, they think about it as, well, a woman can wear whatever she wants, and if it causes problem for somebody else, that's their problem. That's not the way Job was it? He was going to make sure that no matter what, he was going to be careful to make sure that nothing that he caused could cause someone to be hurt or harmed or do something like that, right? That was a big thing for him. That is where, as a matter of fact, in the next word for it, upright, straight, correct, right, level, a man who travels a straight line. He's consistent, he's predictable. You know how they're going to react when presented with a situation, because they always react the same way. And that's you read about folks sometimes they grow up in what you call abusive households, and they'd never know how they'd always walk around eggshells around somebody in the household, because you never know how they might react. That person might blow up at something completely random, that kind of thing. This is the exact opposite of that. This is I know no matter what mistake that I make, I know exactly how he's going to react, how he's going to respond, and I don't need to be afraid of him for it. This is a man who, if he's confronted with somebody else does something that is wrong, that he is going to be just in that. He's not going to let his own emotions cause issues with how he responds or how he tries to correct or something like that. And that if if there was an opportunity, say, for him to gain in an unjust manner, exactly, even if that opportunity is put towards him, he's going to refuse it before it's even put forward. You don't have to doubt that. Consistent. Feared, or as Strong says, morally reverent. Venerate, religious reverence. This is, he feared God, which is as it would be. God is so much more than so many people make him out to be, isn't he? He is so much bigger and so much better and so much more powerful and so much more terrifying if you think about it than people put it to be. And yet, people talk so casually. They take his name in vain so casually, things like that. God's not nothing, right? We don't need to treat him like nothing at any point, do we? We don't need to be casual in the way that we reference him. We don't need to be casual in the way that we serve him. We don't need to be casual in the way that we fear him. Because that's not fearing God properly. That's not untrue God. And as we've been talking about, and I think a lot of commentaries kind of put this roughly in the time of the Judges, and we studied Judges last quarter. It's a very good way to come into it. If you look at it, I mean, how does the rest of Israel match up with that? They don't fear God like that, do they? Every man did what was right in his own eyes, kind of thing. And so this, as far as order goes, this is Job is the exact opposite of how the people were in the time of Judges. It didn't matter what was right in his eyes. He was going to do what was right in God's eyes. A man that feared God and eschewed evil. It's an old word. To turn off, an intentional avoiding. We have a lot of, we've got a lot of more experience with something like this. This is the equivalent to our navigation system telling us there's an accident ahead, get off the interstate to avoid it. You can see the issue up there and you're just not even going to go near it. It's not worth the headache. It's not worth the trouble. It is not worth going through and subjecting yourself to. This is I can see where this might be wrong and I am going to stay away from it. It doesn't matter if it might be the easier way or the faster way, with the way people drive, because, a good percentage of accidents these days happen as a result of other accidents. You get the slow down on the interstate, the people that ain't paying attention, and somebody eventually plows in the back end of somebody else. You're like, you know what? That even if I can get through it, even if it's the fastest way, and it might be there's a problem there, and I don't want to be anywhere near it. He's careful not to do anything. This is the definition when you think about it, when it talks about in the New Testament, not avoiding all the appearance of evil, even, you stay away from problems as such that it doesn't even look like you're doing anything wrong. Nobody can even say that. That's the thing. If you can see that it is a problem or a possible evil that you could be tangled in, you avoid everything about it. And so Job is, as far as those things, as far as the way he reverences God through this at the beginning, this is the very ideal of what folks should be when they think about God and when they live their life. That doesn't say that he's always been completely sinless or anything else. In 13 and 14, it talks about, when Job says, "You caused me to reap the sins of my youth." Who has not made mistakes in their youth, though? The point being is if he had done wrong, like I said, he had made up for it. He'd made the sacrifices. He had repaid whatever he needed to repay. He had done what he needed to, as far as that goes under that law, for it to be forgiven for God. But even still, even if he'd done something that he wasn't proud of a long time ago, his conduct now, as it shows in chapter 29, everybody knows. Everybody can see what he did. Not that he's done it to be seen, but you don't have to dig very far to tell that Job is a godly person. He rescues the poor. He helps the orphans. He comforted the dying. He made the widow's heart sing for joy. He took care of people around him that needed help. We remember the parable of the Good Samaritan and how the Jews had so much trouble, recognizing those they needed to have mercy on. They should have just looked to how Job did. Job did it. He did all of the things that Jesus told the Jews in the New Testament. You guys aren't doing this. I put on righteousness, and it was my clothing. I practiced justice. It was my robe and my turban. Anyone want to take a stab at what they think that means? Adorn himself in it. Just for special occasions? That's every day, right? You get dressed every day, I hope. You go out into the world dressed and ready for whatever it is. When it gets cold outside, you put on a jacket. When it's hot outside, you don't put on a jacket. But you wear the clothes that are right for what you need to do. Well, the clothes that Job was talking about here, the way he clothed himself, he made sure he put on the things that were needly the spiritual things. And he made sure he kept them with himself every day. I was eyes for the blind person. I was feet for the lame person. I was a father to the needy. I carefully investigated cases brought by strangers. If somebody else was lacking, Job sought to fulfill that need. That was the kind of man he is. It was. That was what we're studying. And so when you go in and you see the kind of things that are done to him, and it seems that much more evil as it would be. Because, of course, the thing we know about Job, the thing that stands out more is his suffering, right? The things that have happened to him. As he said, my worst fears have all come true. Not the problem as it would be in Job's life, but if you look at over in the Proverbs, and it tells you that the rich man has more worry because he's got all that stuff to worry about, right? Well, Job had sheep and cattle and all kinds of livestock and all kinds of land and all kinds of servants. And so he did worry about all of those. And he did lose all of those. He had a large family. And obviously he took, as we noted before, he sacrificed for his sons and daughters any time that it might have been something that they'd done that was sinful. So he continuously worried over them, didn't he? And feared for them. And lost them. He lost his health. He even really lost his friends when you look at it, by the time it's all done. And so why does all this come about? What could Job have done to prevent all of these problems? Nothing. And that's the thing I think that our 30-some-odd chapters of discussion and monologue back and forth between Job and his friends, it's basically them accusing him of doing something that's caused all of his problems. And Job's saying, no, I haven't. And the biggest problem with Job is not realizing that, as he speaks, that it doesn't matter what he's done or not, problems still come sometimes. Instead, it seems like he starts to kind of believe his friends a little bit God must believe I've done something, otherwise why would this have happened to me? That's where he gets into his speaking rashly. But whose fault is all of this really? The devil. And so went forth Satan from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot to his crown. You know, given power to do things, and Satan goes at it with a vengeance. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you look at all that Satan did to him, you know, when you study in this, do you think Satan used every possible way to break Job? I mean, did he leave anything left? You know, I mean, it's like Job is fair game. Go, you know, he's allowed to go after him. It's like he used everything, every weapon he had in his arsenal against Job. Or is that how you see it? You know, is there anything that he didn't do to Job? I mean, God restrained him from you know, couldn't take his life. But up until that, I mean, in your opinion, you think the devil he threw everything he had at him?
It seems so. Brother Kirby, you had a point?
He mentioned it, I was gonna say the only restriction God put on him was don't take his life so he could do anything else.
Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing. God restricted him, right? And God restricts Satan. And sometimes, you know, Satan was restricted from taking Job's life, but was he restricted from taking anybody else's life in that scenario? No. No, and so he saw the things that would be most hurtful to Job, and not just Job. You know, who else is Satan targeting with all of his catastrophes and calamities there? Friends, community, and his family, his wife. That's the thing. He is. Yeah, it doesn't say specifically, but I fully believe it. It's every bit of Satan's intention to turn Job's wife against him too. Right? And his friends.
Well, you know, when he told him he built this hedge about him,
Mm-hmm.
all these, 7,000 this, 3,000 sheep, all this wealth, if you let me take that away from him, take that you'll curse him. But he didn't.
Hmm.
He didn't do it. So he went further with that. What did he start taking his family and his health, and then on and on.
Yeah. And so, when you think, and the thing that gets me, you talk about being overwhelmed with all of it. In one day he loses everything, all of his possessions and all of his children. Then on top of that, the next day he loses his health. There's this boils, this inflammation, ulcers. This being a lot of different types. It's used as the plague, the sixth plague in Egypt. It's similar to leprosy, the disease of Hezekiah, one of the diseases that God threatened Israel with, amount evil if they proved unfaithful. So everything from leprosy to smallpox to some other malady. But it was miserable, one way or the other. On the very lightest end of something like this, you ever tried to get a kid to quit scratching a bug bite? Right? But it itches, and while you're scratching it, it brings relief, right? I mean, it doesn't help overall, but while you're scratching it, it does bring relief. Well, the only way that Job was able to get relief was by scraping himself with broken bits of pottery, basically, just about. And if you think, if it's that bad, how can you sleep? How can you do anything? You can't lay down without those sores hurting. You can't stand up for the pain in your joints and everything else in your bones. You can't do anything. And so when your entire existence is misery, what do you need? You need help, right? Surely all of the people that you've gone out of your way to help so much and to do so much good to, surely all of those people will see you at this time of calamity and say, well, let's help Job out, right? He's made me a laughing stock for many people. Now they spit in my face. Now those who are younger than I am laugh at me. I didn't even think their fathers were fit to sit with the dogs of my flock. These guys, they are not good people. But my situation is a laughing stock to them. And we see that, you see that with some folks that, society loves to bring people that are high and mighty down, right? Like to take pleasure in the pain of others. And so now they make fun of me with songs. I become a joke to them. They consider me disgusting. They keep their distance from me. They don't hesitate to spit in my face. I am overcome with terror. My dignity is gone, like a puff of wind. My prosperity, like a cloud. This on top of everything else. We look at all these individual things. There's lots of times that you could see, you can handle anything. I could handle one of those things, maybe. At a time, maybe. I could lose all my possessions. I could lose my health. I could lose my reputation. It would be really, really difficult, if you say if somebody was to lose their family. But, people have soldiered on in that. Well, all of it. All of it at the same time Job has lost. Lost his relationships. He's put my brothers far from me. Those who knew me are wholly estranged from me. My relatives have failed me. My close friends have forgotten me. The guests in my house and my maidservants count me as a stranger. I have become a foreigner in their eyes. I called my servant, but he gives me no answer. I must plead with him with my mouth for mercy. These are the folks that are supposed to be serving and helping Job. The ones he pays. The ones that live in his house and eat his food. And they don't even show him any respect anymore. They won't even do anything. My breath is strange to my wife, and I am a stench to the children of my own mother. Wait, if you don't have to answer this, but if some strange guy just walks up to you and starts talking to you, you're just going to look at him kind of sideways and step away, right? That's it. My wife treats me like I'm some stranger that's just walked up to her. Not like the person that I've loved and cherished for years. My brothers and sisters, they act like I'm a puddle of scum that just stinks, that needs to be gotten away from as quick as possible. Young children about, they despise me. My intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I loved have turned against me. Everything that Job had was gone. He even lost his hope. Everything I'd planned to do with my life is just gone. I wish it was like it used to be. I was in my prime. My friendship with God was here. My children were well. My steps were washed with butter, and the rock poured out for me streams of oil. I felt certain I would live a long and happy life and die in my own bed. When we're all prosperous and everything is going okay and we don't think anything bad can happen, right? Well, lots of people in here have experienced that. Suddenly something bad happens, right? And so Job is at that place. What do you do? What do you do when your dreams don't come true? What do you do when everything doesn't work out the way you wanted it to? That's the question. The answer to that is going to be the wisdom that you get from the lesson of Job. You know, Job doesn't, it doesn't matter why all these things happen to Job. Although we can see, you know, they happen for no good reason, really, as far as that goes, to Job. He's never even explained or any of that, but that's not the wisdom of it. The wisdom, the lesson I think that we get from Job is not that things happen to people. It's the reaction that we should have, right? It's the knowledge that we should be able to see. You know, Job was able and was shown and was finally able to put all of this to the side and to worship God properly. And all of this that happened to him, he's lost more than anybody else is ever going to lose at once. And so it shows us when we're faced with any of these situations how we